Welcome back to our course on FinTech, Disruptive Innovation and Implications for Society. In this session, we're going to look at the concept of evolutionary disruption versus revolutionary disruption, or to what degree is an innovation truly a disruptive innovation to industry structure, or may it just be a level of change that the industry is able to adapt to, evolve within, and embrace. Now, some revolutions are technology revolutions or technology innovations that are not inherently disruptive to an industry. For example, go back in history, the first automobiles were not disruptive of the horse and carriage industry. They weren't that good, they were kind of niche products, they worked, but they need a lot of work, and they were kind of niche applications. And they were also kind of expensive. In much the same way you could say that Tesla's early cars were not that disruptive to Detroit or Tokyo auto industries. Yeah, they took some high-end sales. They might annoy you if you're Ferrari and you lost a couple of sales to a Tesla car, but maybe not. And they're niche high-end products, relatively speaking, in the market. They may compete with Mercedes, and you may not buy your Mercedes, you might buy a Tesla, but it's not going to disrupt the entire industry structure. Tesla Model 3 is different. And it might be much more disruptive. And as you move down in cost and more into mass market, you start to see a much more disruptive effect. So what happened in the early auto industry is we said, cars are kind of specialty, unique, a little unusual, not mass market things, and not going to challenge horse-drawn vehicles. A horse was the common way of getting around, and carriage was common. But then came Ford. Henry Ford had a vision and a new process for making cars. He didn't make cars as a new idea. He found a new way of producing cars at much, much lower cost. And it was the mass production process and driving down the price and the cost that created a disruptive innovation. It created a car that was very attractive as an economic proposition versus a horse-drawn carriage. Now you're talking about a market that's huge compared to the niche market of cars. And Henry Ford had a vision of every man being able to have a car. He'd be proud to see Americans, every man having a car today. Unfortunately, he might not like the fact that those cars are from Honda or Toyota and not necessarily Fords that people are driving unless they're driving a truck. But still, cars are common in society. Ford did that. He was the first mass-produced automobile manufacturer, and he created a new market, a new disruption. Now, some products may be disruptive for society or disruptive for some types of jobs, but the industry can adapt. So AI in the automobile industry. Let's go to today. Self-driving cars. How big a deal is this? Well, Mercedes-Benz has said if we do not get into this AI world and self-driving cars, we may not be in the automobile industry in 10 years. They see this as a big deal. General Motors, Ford, others heavily investing in AI, very concerned about what Google's doing, very concerned about what other firms are doing, and innovations in AI, and looking and saying we don't want to be left behind as people rethink what a car is and what this means for the industry. I talked to my brother about this, who works in high-tech and Silicon Valley business, and says, oh, don't worry about it. You're not going to be driving a self-driving car for at least 10 years. It's going to be too expensive. It's going to be a high-end thing. It's going to be for, competing with taxis like Uber self-driving cars. You're not going to have it as a mass market vehicle. If that is the case, if my brother's vision is right, and I'm not saying he's wrong, I'm saying my brother is not always right, but if he's right in this case, that is not a disruptive innovation. That's an evolutionary innovation. We'll have high-cost cars, the automotive industry will be able to adapt, there'll be some leaders, but eventually they'll acquire some leading firms, or they'll acquire the capabilities, and they'll be able to have time. They'll have time to adapt. They will evolve. But if self-driving cars within 3 years come out as mass market vehicles, if Uber starts to provide lots of self-driving cars at low cost, and this is incredibly disruptive to taxis, if self-driving cars start to become mass market items, Tesla can make self-driving cars that work well and don't kill people, and sell them at a price point where you can say, yeah, $30,000 I can get a self-driving car. Why would I get something that isn't self-driving? Now, I'm not always sure I want a self-driving car. I mean, my wife and I were talking about this, and we love Corvettes. If you're not an American, maybe you don't know what a Corvette is. But if you've never driven a Corvette, you've missed out on a really cool experience. They're like a Ferrari for poor people or medium-class people. They're really cool cars. And I was thinking about this and saying, you know what? I don't want a robot driving my Corvette. Part of the purpose of owning a sports car is the thrill of driving it. But I also don't want to drive home from the office. I want to be able to get my car to come pick me up and take me where I want to go, and be able to read or talk or do whatever I want to do. I love the idea of a self-driving car. And there's no way I would be buying a car that is not self-driving if I have the self-driving option. That would be saying, do you want a dumb phone or do you want a smartphone? Now, I of course want a smartphone. You know, how stupid am I? I may take a cheap smartphone. I may not need the newest Apple product, but I at least want a lot of these capabilities of an intelligent phone. I like Apple better. I'm just not sure I'm willing to pay the premium, but I definitely want a smartphone, and I definitely want a smart car. Is that a disruptive innovation? We don't know. The automotive industry is trying to make sure it's not. And so they're investing heavily in AI, and they're trying to stay close enough to Google and close enough to other market leaders that they don't get bypassed, because the danger is if they go 3 or 4 or 5 years, they may be lost. They may be obsolete. In FinTech, what does this mean? Well, the question becomes, how long do banks have to catch up? How long do they have to react? If market penetration of products or ideas or applications is fast, if consumer take-up is fast, this could be devastating. So if we look, for example, to China, and we look at what's happened with payment systems in China, you've gone from a society largely based on cash, where credit cards were not that common, to a society largely based on smartphone payments with Alipay or Tencent Bank, or WeChat Pay. This is amazing. This is fast. And so you start to see this evolution happening so fast that it's going to be very, very hard and probably impossible for traditional banks to react. They're not going to get people back to a credit card when they've gone to a smartphone app and they're used to it. It is so much more convenient. Now in the US, we use Apple Pay, we use other forms of payment systems, and we have Venmo, we have other things. Some of these are real challenging, but by and large, banks have had time to react. In China, they have not. This is the difference between disruptive innovations, which are revolutionary in their change and disrupt an industry, versus evolutionary, and we have time to adapt. So one of the questions is, how fast? How quick and do we have time to react? If we don't, we may be like a retailer who says, I'm done. I got to go bankrupt. I can't make it. Or we may be like a retailer who says, I see what's happening. I can react and adapt, and I'm still in business. Thank you.